Hello, I'm Masato. I'm a solution consultant with Hitachi, and today I'm going to go over, well, originally this was about putting up a replication link between two HCPs, but in order to do that, we have to do a few things to test. So we're going to need to create a tenant, a namespace, and a user on our HCP1, and then we'll download the Hitachi Data Migrator, and we'll put some data in that tenant, and then we will set up a tenant namespace HCP2, and then we'll replicate between the two. So let's get started. I'm on my HCP1, and this is a 7.3 HCP. It already has Active Directory integration, so we should be good to go with that. So I'm going to create a tenant, and I'm already in the System Management Console on the HCP. So I'm going to go to Tenants, and I'm create a tenant, and I'm going to call this tenant 1. I'm going to give it a hard quota of about 50 gig. Quota at 85%. And namespace quota is just the number of namespaces that I can create in that tenant. I'm only going to create one, but I could put one, or I could just say no quota. If I say quota, it's going to be around 10,000 namespaces. That's a number based on the entire HCP. So as you create namespaces and other tenants, that number will decrement. So it all has Active Directory checked for authentication type and the initial security, but I need to create a local user on this tenant because Data Migrator uses local accounts. It doesn't have Active Directory integration. So we're going to create a local user. But before we do that, we're going to Active Directory group and give it access, security access to this tenant so it can manage it. So this is Active Directory group that I've already created in Active Directory, and I'm just going to add it here. It's called CP, and if I just type HCP, it'll list them out. So HCP admins, and domain is hdsnj.com. That's the group I'm giving information access to. Now, I'm going to check off replication here, so a little bit about that. So we're going to check off replication at the tenant level, and then create namespaces within the tenant. You can check off whether or not those namespaces will have replication. So by checking this, we're not starting replication yet. We're simply saying that this tenant is a candidate to have replication. So when we're ready to do the replication, we're going to go into services, replication, and we're going to create a link, and then we'll see the tenant there, and then we'll add it to a link. Not until that point does replication actually start. So we'll just leave it here, and that should be all we have to do on this namespace. I'm going to create the tenant. It was successfully created. Okay, so now I'm going to go into that tenant and I create a namespace in that tenant. I will sign on enabled on my machine, but I'm just going to use my Active Directory things here. So I'm going to use Active Directory. Okay, so when we come into any namespace or e-tenant, it's going to be a default setting. So now all we have is security rights for this. So we have to give ourselves some more rights. To do that, we have security, and then we're going to go to groups, because you remember we came in via Active Directory. So we have this group role capabilities in this tenant. So I'm going to say it can monitor, it can administrate, and it can do compliance stuff. When I update this up here is going to change. I only have 2 selections now. It's going to update that and give me more menu items. Okay, so refresh now. I see I have more menu items up here. So now I can go and create a namespace. I'm going to go to namespaces, create, and I'm just going to call this namespace 1. The Active Directory again, just because it's simple for me. And 50 gig hard quota, 85% soft quota, that's good. everything looks good here. I'm going to allow this to be replicated and create the namespace. Okay, created the namespace. Now, remember I said I had to create a local user to put data in here, so I'm going to go to security and users and create a user account. And I'm going to call this guy. You have a full name in here, it'll bark at you. Password. And for the actual tenant. So I don't want to give this user any of these rights, but I do want to give him namespace permissions. So I click on namespace permissions here. You can see namespace 1 popped up. If I had multiple namespaces, they would be here in a list. I'm going to select that. This is what rights I want to give him in that namespace. So I say select all. And create the user account. Okay. So that do it. So now created the namespace tenant. So you can see we're in the tenant management. Namespaces will see that namespace, and everything is there. Okay, so we're going to download Data Migrator and put some data into this namespace.